You know what hurts more than losing your house? Losing it to your own son. I'm 67 years old, and 2 weeks ago I discovered that my name had been mysteriously removed from the deed of the home I've lived in for 35 years. The same home where I raised 3 children after my wife died. The same home where I scraped together every penny to pay the mortgage while working double shifts at the factory. My oldest son, Caleb, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Dad, you're too old to own property." Then he walked away quietly, like he hadn't just destroyed everything I worked for my entire life. But what Caleb didn't know was that I had one card left to play. And when I played it, well, let's just say karma has a funny way of evening things out. But before I tell you how I got my revenge, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever been underestimated because of your age, or if you just love a good story about justice being served, smash that subscribe button right now. Hit the bell icon so you never miss these incredible true stories, and drop a comment below telling me about a time someone underestimated you. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one because what happened next will blow your mind. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare began. My name is Eugene Patterson, and I've lived more life than most people twice my age. I was born in 1956 in a small town outside of Cleveland, Ohio. My father worked in the steel mills, and my mother cleaned houses for wealthy families across town. They taught me that hard work and family loyalty were the only things that mattered in this world. I married my high school sweetheart, Sarah, when I was 22. She was the kind of woman who could make a house feel like a home just by walking through the door. We had 3 children together, Caleb born in 1979, followed by my daughter Michelle in 1981, and my youngest, Tyler, in 1985. In 1988, when Caleb was just 9 years old, we bought our dream home on Maple Street. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, a modest 3-bedroom ranch with a small front yard and a chain-link fence. But to us, it was everything. The mortgage was $87,000, which might as well have been $1 million on my factory worker's salary. Those were the golden years. Sarah would pack lunches for all of us every morning. Caleb was the star of his little league team. Michelle was always bringing home stray cats and wounded birds, and Tyler was my shadow. Wherever I went, he wanted to be right there beside me, learning how to fix things, asking a million questions about everything. But life has a way of changing when you least expect it. In 1996, everything changed in a single phone call. I was at work, operating the press machine like I had for 15 years, when my supervisor came over with a look I'll never forget. "Eugene," he said, "you need to get to the hospital. Now." Sarah had been driving home from her part-time job at the local library when a drunk driver ran a red light and hit her car head-on. She died instantly. The kids were 17, 15, and 11 years old, respectively. I remember standing in that hospital hallway, staring at the white linoleum floor, wondering how I was supposed to raise 3 children by myself. But Sarah's voice echoed in my head. "Take care of our babies, Eugene. No matter what happens, you take care of our babies." So that's exactly what I did. I worked overtime every week for the next decade, double shifts on weekends. I picked up side jobs doing home repairs and landscaping. Every penny went toward keeping that house and making sure my kids had everything they needed. College funds, school clothes, Tyler's baseball equipment, Michelle's art supplies, and Caleb. Caleb always seemed to need more than the others. Even as a teenager, Caleb had expensive tastes. He wanted the newest video games, brand-name clothes, and later, he expected me to help him buy his first car. Not just any car, mind you. A nearly new Honda Accord that cost more than I made in 3 months. "Dad," he'd say, "you want me to look successful, don't you? Image matters." I should have seen the red flags then, but I was still grieving Sarah and trying to be both parents to 3 kids who were grieving too. Caleb was always the charming one. Even as a child, he had this way of talking adults into giving him whatever he wanted. Teachers loved him. Neighbors thought he was such a polite young man, and I was proud that my oldest son seemed destined for greatness. He went to Ohio State University on a partial academic scholarship, which I was incredibly proud of. but I still had to take out a second mortgage on the house to cover his remaining expenses. Room and board, textbooks, spending money. It added up fast. "This is an investment in my future, Dad," Caleb would say during our weekly phone calls. "And when I'm successful, I'll take care of you. You'll never have to worry about money again." I believed him. God help me. I believed every word. After college, Caleb got a job with a financial services company in Columbus. He started making good money, better than I'd ever made, and he loved reminding me of that fact. He bought himself a luxury apartment, a BMW, and started wearing suits that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Michelle and Tyler, meanwhile, stayed close to home. Michelle became a teacher and married a good man named David. They live just 20 minutes away and visit me every Sunday. Tyler followed in my footsteps working construction, and he calls me almost every day just to check in. But Caleb got busy with his important career and his important friends. Our weekly phone calls became monthly, then quarterly, then just holidays and birthdays. About 5 years ago, when I turned 62, Caleb started making comments about my age. Little things at first. "Dad, are you sure you should be driving at night? Your reflexes aren't what they used to be. Maybe you should consider moving somewhere smaller. This house is too much for an old man to maintain. Have you thought about what's going to happen to your finances when you can't work anymore?" At the time, I thought he was being caring, looking out for his old man. But now I realize it was all part of a plan. 2 years ago, Caleb suggested that I add his name to the deed of the house, just for estate planning purposes. "Dad," he explained during one of his rare visits, "if something happens to you, the house will get tied up in probate for months. Michelle and Tyler won't be able to access any of the equity to pay for your funeral or settle your debts. But if my name is on the deed as joint owner, I can handle everything smoothly." He had documents with him, official-looking papers that he said his lawyer friend had prepared as a favor. He walked me through every page, explaining how this would protect the family and make everything easier for everyone. I was 65 years old, living alone and starting to feel the weight of all those years of hard labor. My back ached constantly, and I was beginning to worry about what would happen to my kids if I died suddenly like Sarah had. So I signed the papers. Caleb promised me that this was just a formality, that I would always have full control of the house, that nothing would change except the legal paperwork. He hugged me and said, "Thanks for trusting me, Dad. I'm going to take such good care of you. I should have known better. I should have talked to my own lawyer. I should have discussed it with Michelle and Tyler. But Caleb was my son, and I trusted him completely. That was the biggest mistake of my life. For the first year after signing those papers, nothing changed. I continued living in my house, paying all the bills, maintaining the property. Caleb would call occasionally to check in, always asking about my health and whether I was managing okay on my own. But then things started to shift in subtle ways. Last year, when my water heater broke down and needed to be replaced, I called a plumber to get an estimate. When the plumber asked for proof of ownership to file the permit, I realized I didn't have the updated deed showing Caleb as co-owner. No big deal, I thought. I'd asked Caleb to send me a copy. When I called Caleb about it, his tone was different. "Dad, why do you need to see the deed? I'm handling all the legal stuff now, remember? Just tell the plumber to call me directly if he needs any documentation." Something about the way he said it made my stomach turn, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was my son, my firstborn, the child I'd sacrificed everything for. But the feelings of unease kept growing. When I mentioned to Michelle that Caleb was now on the deed, her face went white. "Dad, why would you do that without talking to us? Tyler and I could have helped you with estate planning. We could have found you a lawyer." "Caleb is a financial professional," I defended. "He knows what he's doing." But Michelle's reaction stuck with me. That night, I lay awake thinking about all the conversations I'd had with Caleb over the past few months. How he kept asking about my health, my memory, whether I was confused about things. How he'd started talking about assisted living facilities and how nice some of them were. The next morning, I decided to call the county recorder's office to request a copy of the current deed, just to put my mind at ease. What I found out changed everything. The woman at the recorder's office was very helpful. She looked up my property and confirmed that there had indeed been a recent change to the deed. "Let's see here, Mr. Patterson," she said. "It looks like in February of 2022, ownership was transferred to, let me make sure I'm reading this correctly. The property is now solely owned by Caleb Patterson. Your name was removed entirely." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "That's not right," I stammered. "I signed papers to add him to the deed, not to remove myself." "I'm sorry, sir, but according to our records, you signed a quitclaim deed transferring full ownership to Caleb Patterson. The notarization looks legitimate and your signature is on file." I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen for 2 hours, staring at the table where I'd signed those papers. The same table where Sarah and I used to pay bills together. The same table where I'd helped all 3 kids with their homework. Caleb had lied to me. He hadn't added himself to the deed. He had tricked me into signing the entire house over to him. I was no longer the owner of the home I'd lived in for 35 years. The home where I'd raised my children. The home I'd nearly killed myself working to pay off. According to the law, I was now just a tenant living in my son's house. But it got worse. That evening, I called Caleb. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number. "Hey, Dad," he answered, sounding cheerful. "What's up?" "Caleb, I called the county recorder's office today." There was a long pause. "Okay," he said, and I could hear the wariness in his voice. "They told me that you're now the sole owner of the house, that my name has been completely removed from the deed." Another pause, longer this time. "Dad, we talked about this. Remember? You were having some confusion about the legal aspects, so I simplified things. This way, you don't have to worry about any of the paperwork or legal responsibilities." "Confusion? Caleb, I'm not confused about anything. You told me you were adding your name to the deed, not removing mine." "Dad, I think your memory might be playing tricks on you. This is exactly what we discussed. Look, I know this might seem scary, but I'm taking care of everything now. You don't need to worry about the house anymore." The condescending tone in his voice made my blood boil. "This is my house, Caleb. I've been paying the mortgage for 35 years. Actually, Dad, it's my house now, legally speaking. But don't worry, you can keep living there as long as you're able to take care of yourself. As long as I'm able to take care of myself." The threat was clear. What the hell does that mean? "Dad, you're 67 years old. You're living alone in a big house, and honestly, Michelle and Tyler and I have been worried about you. Maybe it's time to start thinking about your options." "My options?" "Well, there are some really nice senior living communities around here. Places where you'd have people to check on you, meals provided, activities with other people your age." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own son was trying to kick me out of my own home so he could... What? Sell it? Rent it out? Move in himself? "Caleb, I am not moving to some old folks' home. This is my house. Dad, we've been through this. It's not your house anymore. But like I said, you can stay there for now. Just maybe start thinking about the future, okay?" He hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, my whole body shaking with rage and betrayal. This was my son. The baby I'd rocked to sleep when he had nightmares. The little boy I'd taught to ride a bike and throw a baseball. The teenager I'd stayed up all night helping with his college applications, and he had just stolen everything from me. The next day I called Michelle and Tyler and asked them to come over. I needed my family around me, and I needed to figure out what to do. When I told them what Caleb had done, the room went silent. Tyler was the first to speak. "Dad, we have to sue him. This is fraud. He can't just steal your house." But Michelle, always the practical one, asked the hard questions. "Dad, do you have copies of the original documents Caleb brought you? Do you remember exactly what he said when you signed them?" The truth was, I didn't have copies of anything. Caleb had taken all the paperwork with him, saying he'd handle the filing, and while I remembered him saying he was adding his name to the deed, I couldn't prove that's what he told me. "We need to call a lawyer," Michelle said. So we did. The lawyer, a kind woman named Patricia Hendricks, listened to my story and reviewed the deed transfer. "Mr. Patterson," she said gently, "this is definitely fraud if what you're telling me is true. But proving it is going to be challenging. Your son could claim that you knew exactly what you were signing, or that your memory is faulty due to your age." "My memory is fine," I protested. "I believe you," she assured me. "But in court, it's going to be his word against yours. And unfortunately, adult children taking advantage of elderly parents is more common than you'd think. The courts have seen cases where parents later claimed they didn't understand what they were signing." She explained that I could file a lawsuit, but it would be expensive, time-consuming, and far from guaranteed to succeed. "There might be another approach," she suggested. "If your son is planning to sell the house or use it as collateral for anything, he'd need clear title. You could make things complicated for him. But that's a conversation for another day." I left her office feeling defeated. My own son had outsmarted me, and now I was just an old man with no legal recourse. But I wasn't ready to give up yet. Over the next few weeks, Caleb started calling me more frequently, but these weren't the loving check-ins of a concerned son. They were interrogations. "Dad, Michelle mentioned that you've been having trouble remembering things. Is that true?" "Dad, Tyler said you seemed confused when you were talking about the house. Maybe we should have you see a doctor." "Dad, I've been thinking about what's best for you, and I really think you should consider moving to that assisted living place I told you about. I could help you pack." Each conversation was the same. Caleb would plant seeds of doubt about my mental capacity, then offer his solution: me moving out of my house so he could do whatever he wanted with it. But the worst part was how he started involving other people. He called Michelle and Tyler, expressing concerns about my mental state. He told them I'd been confused during our phone calls, that I'd forgotten our agreement about the house transfer. "I'm really worried about Dad," he told Michelle. "I think he might be developing dementia. Maybe you should talk to him about getting a cognitive evaluation." Michelle called me immediately after that conversation. "Dad, Caleb is saying some concerning things about your memory. He thinks you might be struggling cognitively." "Michelle, there is nothing wrong with my mind. Your brother stole my house and now he's trying to make everyone think I'm crazy so no one will believe me." But I could hear the doubt in Michelle's voice. Caleb was a financial professional after all. He wore expensive suits and lived in a luxury apartment. He sounded credible and successful. I was just a retired factory worker living alone. The manipulation was working. 3 months ago, Caleb showed up at my house unannounced. He was carrying a briefcase and wearing that fake smile he'd perfected over the years. "Hey, Dad, we need to talk." He sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where he'd tricked me into signing away my house, and opened his briefcase. "I've been doing some research and I found a really nice place for you to live. Sunset Manor. It's a beautiful assisted living community about 20 minutes from here." He pulled out a glossy brochure filled with photos of smiling elderly people playing bingo and gardening in raised beds. They have activities every day, 3 meals provided, housekeeping service, and medical staff on site 24/7. You'd never have to worry about maintaining this big house or managing your finances. They handle everything. I stared at the brochure, my hands clenched into fists. "And the best part," Caleb continued, "is that I can afford to pay for it using the equity from the house. I've already spoken to a real estate agent, and she thinks we could get around $280,000 for this place. After paying off the remaining mortgage balance, that would be more than enough to cover your care for years to come." There it was. The real plan. Caleb was going to sell my house and use the money to warehouse me in some old folks' home while he pocketed the rest. He'd stolen my home and was now trying to steal my independence. "I'm not going anywhere," I said quietly. "Dad, be reasonable. You're almost 70 years old. You can't live alone forever. What if you fall? What if you have a heart attack? What if you forget to turn off the stove and burn the house down? There is nothing wrong with my mind. and there's nothing wrong with my body that means I can't live in my own home. Caleb sighed and closed the brochure. Dad, this isn't really a negotiation. I'm trying to be nice about this and let you choose the facility, but legally, I own this house. I can evict you if I need to. The words hit me like a physical blow. You would evict your own father? I would do whatever is necessary to make sure you're safe and properly cared for, even if you can't see that it's what's best for you. He stood up and put the brochure on the table. Think about it, Dad. The easy way or the hard way, that's your choice, but one way or another, you're not staying in this house much longer. After he left, I sat at that table and cried for the first time since Sarah's funeral. 2 weeks later, Caleb called with an ultimatum. Dad, I've scheduled a tour of Sunset Manor for you this Friday at 2 p.m. I'll pick you up at 1:30. I told you I'm not interested. And I told you, this isn't optional anymore. I've been patient, but you're being unreasonable. Either you come with me voluntarily to look at the facility, or I'll start eviction proceedings. It's up to you. I hung up on him. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about everything that had led to this moment. How had I raised a son who could be so cruel? How had the sweet little boy who used to crawl into my lap for bedtime stories grown into a man who would steal from his own father? But more than that, I kept thinking about Sarah. What would she think if she could see what Caleb had become? What would she think about me letting him get away with it? Friday came, and at 1:30 p.m. sharp, Caleb knocked on my door. Ready to go, Dad? I opened the door and looked at my oldest son. Really looked at him. The expensive suit, the arrogant smile, the complete lack of remorse in his eyes for what he was doing to me. You're too old to own property, he said, as if that explained everything. As if my age automatically disqualified me from having the rights I'd earned through 35 years of hard work and sacrifice. I didn't say a word. I just closed the door in his face and walked away quietly. But as I sat in my living room listening to him drive away, I realized something important. Caleb had made one critical mistake. You see, when I signed those papers 2 years ago, I wasn't the only one who signed them. Caleb had to sign them too, as the person receiving ownership of the property. But there was something Caleb didn't know about those signatures. 3 years ago, when my back problems were getting worse, my doctor recommended that I start working with a physical therapist. The therapy was expensive, but I needed to keep working to pay my bills, so I applied for a medical loan through my credit union. As part of the loan application process, I had to provide extensive documentation of my medical condition, my treatment plan, and my prognosis. The loan officer explained that because of my age and health issues, they needed to be extra careful about my ability to repay the loan. One of the requirements was a comprehensive cognitive evaluation to ensure I was mentally competent to enter into the loan agreement. I passed that evaluation with flying colors. The doctor's report, dated just 6 months before Caleb tricked me into signing the deed transfer, stated clearly that I showed no signs of cognitive impairment and possessed full mental capacity to make financial and legal decisions. I still had a copy of that report. But more importantly, I remembered something else about that loan application process. The credit union required me to list all of my assets, including my house. As part of their due diligence, they had contacted the county recorder's office to verify that I was the sole owner of the property, which meant there was an official record, created just 6 months before the deed transfer, confirming that I owned the house free and clear with no other names on the deed. If Caleb wanted to claim that I'd been confused about what I was signing, he'd have to explain how I'd been mentally competent enough to qualify for a medical loan 6 months earlier, but suddenly developed dementia by the time he needed me to sign his paperwork. But that wasn't the best part. The best part was something I discovered while digging through my old financial records. When I'd taken out that medical loan, the credit union had required me to carry additional life insurance to protect their investment. The policy was small, just $50,000, but it required annual health evaluations to maintain coverage. I'd had my most recent evaluation just 3 weeks before Caleb's ultimatum. The insurance company's doctor had pronounced me to be in excellent physical and mental health for my age. But here's what Caleb didn't know. That insurance policy listed my house as my primary asset and confirmed my ownership of the property. More importantly, the policy had a very specific clause about fraud. If anyone attempted to fraudulently claim or transfer ownership of my assets, the insurance company would investigate and potentially involve law enforcement. I had documentation proving my mental competency, records showing my legal ownership of the house right up until Caleb's trick, and an insurance policy that would trigger an investigation if anyone tried to steal from me. But I still wasn't sure how to use this information effectively. That's when I remembered something Patricia Hendricks, the lawyer, had said during our consultation. If your son is planning to sell the house or use it as collateral for anything, he'd need clear title. You could make things complicated for him. I needed to find out what Caleb was planning to do with my house. So I did something I never thought I'd do in a million years. I hired a private investigator. The private investigator, a former police detective named Marcus Rodriguez, was recommended by Patricia Hendricks. He specialized in financial fraud cases involving elderly victims. Mr. Patterson, he explained during our first meeting, what your son did is called deed theft, and it's unfortunately very common. Adult children convince their aging parents to sign documents under false pretenses, then take ownership of property worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Marcus agreed to look into Caleb's finances and activities to see what his real plans were for my house. What he found out was even worse than I'd imagined. Caleb wasn't just planning to sell my house, he'd already used it as collateral for a business loan. 3 months earlier, just 1 week after he'd given me the ultimatum about moving to assisted living, Caleb had taken out a $200,000 loan against the property. He'd told the bank he was planning to renovate the house and rent it out as an investment property. But instead of using the money for renovations, he'd invested it in some high-risk cryptocurrency venture that had subsequently crashed. He'd lost almost all of the money. Now he was desperate to get me out of the house so he could sell it quickly and pay back the loan before the bank realized what had happened. If he couldn't sell the house, he'd default on the loan, and the bank would foreclose. He'd lose everything, and so would I. But Marcus discovered something even more interesting. When Caleb had applied for the loan, he'd lied to the bank about the circumstances of the property transfer. He'd claimed that I had willingly signed the house over to him as a gift because I was no longer capable of managing my affairs due to age-related cognitive decline. He'd told the bank that I was already living in assisted care and that the house had been vacant for months. The bank had approved the loan based on these false statements. Mr. Patterson, Marcus explained, your son has committed multiple felonies. Deed fraud, bank fraud, elder abuse, and possibly money laundering if he moved that cryptocurrency money through multiple accounts. But more importantly for your situation, he continued, the bank's loan is invalid if it was obtained through fraudulent means. If we can prove that Caleb lied about the circumstances of the property transfer, the bank would have grounds to call in the loan immediately. And if Caleb can't pay back the loan? Then the original deed transfer becomes irrelevant. The bank would have to pursue legal action against him personally, and you'd have grounds to challenge the transfer based on the fraud. Marcus handed me a thick folder full of documents, bank records, and photographs. The question is, he said, what do you want to do with this information? I knew exactly what I wanted to do. That night, I sat in my kitchen and thought about everything Caleb had put me through over the past 2 years. The lies, the manipulation, the threats, the humiliation. He'd stolen my house, tried to destroy my relationship with Michelle and Tyler, and attempted to have me declared mentally incompetent so no one would believe my accusations. But worst of all, he dishonored his mother's memory and betrayed everything Sarah and I had taught him about family loyalty and treating people with respect. I decided it was time for Caleb to learn a lesson he'd never forget. The next morning, I called Patricia Hendricks and asked her to draft a very specific letter. Then I drove to the bank where Caleb had taken out his fraudulent loan. The bank manager, a professional woman named Janet Morrison, was initially skeptical when I walked into her office claiming to be the rightful owner of a property that Caleb Patterson had used as collateral. But when I showed her my documentation, the medical loan records proving my ownership of the house, the cognitive evaluation proving my mental competency, the insurance policy confirming my assets, and Marcus Rodriguez's investigation report detailing Caleb's lies, her expression changed completely. "Mr. Patterson," she said, "if what you're telling me is true, then Mr. Patterson obtained this loan through fraudulent means." "That's exactly what I'm telling you." She spent the next hour reviewing every document in my file, making phone calls to verify the information, and consulting with the bank's legal department. Finally, she looked up at me with a grim expression. "Mr. Patterson, we're going to need to conduct a full investigation into this loan. In the meantime, I'm freezing the account and flagging this as a potential fraud case." "What does that mean for my son?" "Well, if our investigation confirms fraud, we'll be calling in the loan immediately. All $200,000, plus interest and penalties. And we'll be referring the matter to law enforcement for potential criminal charges." I handed her Patricia Hendricks's letter. "I'd like you to send this to my son today." She read the letter and raised her eyebrows. "Mr. Patterson, are you sure about this? Once we send this, there's no going back." "I'm sure." The letter was simple and direct. "Dear Mr. Patterson, our records indicate that you obtained a loan from this institution using property located at address as collateral. We have recently been contacted by Eugene Patterson, who claims to be the rightful owner of this property and alleges that the deed transfer to you was obtained through fraudulent means. We have reviewed Mr. Eugene Patterson's documentation, including medical records, cognitive evaluations, and property ownership records, and have determined that there are serious questions about the legitimacy of your loan application. Please contact our office within 72 hours to provide documentation supporting your claim to ownership of the collateral property. Failure to provide satisfactory documentation will result in this loan being called in immediately, with full payment of principal, interest, and penalties due within 30 days. Additionally, this matter has been referred to our fraud investigation department and may be referred to law enforcement if criminal activity is suspected. Sincerely, Janet Morrison, Loan Department Manager. I walked out of that bank feeling better than I had in 2 years. Caleb thought he was so smart. He thought he'd outmaneuvered his old stupid father and gotten away with the perfect crime. But he'd forgotten one important thing. I might be old, but I wasn't stupid, and I had learned a thing or two about fighting back over the course of my 67 years. Caleb received the letter on a Thursday. He called me that same afternoon, and I could hear the panic in his voice. "Dad, what did you do?" "I did what I should have done 2 years ago. I told the truth." "Dad, you don't understand. This is going to ruin everything. I used that money for an investment that was supposed to pay off big. If I can pay back the loan in 6 months, I'll have enough profit to buy you a house twice as nice as the one you're living in now." "Caleb, I don't want another house. I want my house, the one you stole from me." "I didn't steal anything. You signed those papers willingly." "Because you lied to me about what they were." There was a long pause. "Dad," he said, and his voice had changed. The panic was gone, replaced by something cold and calculated. "If you don't call the bank and tell them this was all a misunderstanding, I'm going to have to take steps to protect myself." "What kind of steps?" "I'm going to file a petition to have you declared mentally incompetent. I have documentation showing that you've been confused about the house transfer, that you've been making irrational accusations, and that your memory has been failing." "What documentation?" "I've been recording our phone conversations, Dad. I have hours of recordings of you saying things that don't make sense, claiming to not remember agreements we made, accusing me of things I never did." My blood ran cold. He'd been recording me? "Plus," he continued, "I have Michelle and Tyler as witnesses to your declining mental state. They'll testify that you've been paranoid and confused." "Michelle and Tyler know you're lying." "Do they?" "Because I've been sharing my concerns about you with them for months. They've seen the signs, Dad. The forgetfulness, the paranoia, the irrational accusations. They'll confirm that you need supervised care." The worst part was, I could see how it might work. Caleb was smooth and convincing. He had recordings that were probably edited to make me sound confused. He'd been planting seeds of doubt about my mental capacity for months. So here's what's going to happen, Caleb continued. You're going to call the bank tomorrow morning and tell them you were confused about the house situation. You're going to apologize for wasting their time and confirm that the deed transfer was legitimate. Then you're going to pack your things and move to Sunset Manor like we discussed. And if I don't? Then I'll file the competency petition, have you declared mentally unfit, and move you to a state-run facility instead of the nice place I picked out. Trust me, Dad, you don't want that. He hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, my whole body shaking with rage. But this time it wasn't just anger at what Caleb was doing to me. It was anger at myself for not seeing this coming sooner. But then I remembered something important. Caleb had just made his second critical mistake. You see, when Marcus Rodriguez had investigated Caleb's financial activities, he'd also looked into his personal life. What he'd found was very interesting. Caleb's expensive lifestyle wasn't being funded just by his salary from the financial services company. He'd been living off credit cards and loans for years, always staying one step ahead of his creditors by taking out new loans to pay off old ones. The $200,000 he'd borrowed against my house wasn't his first attempt at fraud. Marcus had found evidence of at least 3 other suspicious transactions over the past 5 years, including a car loan he'd obtained by inflating his income and a business loan he'd taken out for a company that existed only on paper. But more importantly, Marcus had discovered that Caleb's employer had recently launched an internal investigation into some irregularities in client accounts that Caleb managed. Caleb was already under suspicion at work. If his employer found out about the bank fraud and the elder abuse charges, he wouldn't just lose his job. He'd likely face criminal prosecution and would never work in financial services again. But Caleb didn't know that I knew any of this. So when he called me the next morning to ask if I'd contacted the bank yet, I was ready for him. Dad, please tell me you've already called Janet Morrison and cleared this whole thing up. Actually, Caleb, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. Good. I knew you'd come to your senses. You mentioned that you've been recording our phone calls. There was a pause. Yeah, for your own protection, to help document your mental decline. Well, that's interesting, because I've been doing some recording of my own. What do you mean? I mean that yesterday's conversation, where you threatened to have me declared mentally incompetent if I didn't help you cover up your bank fraud, is now in the hands of my lawyer. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. Along with, I continued, recordings of our previous conversations where you admitted to lying to me about the deed transfer, where you threatened to evict me from my own house, and where you detailed your plans to sell my property without my consent. Dad, you can't. I can and I did, but that's not the best part, Caleb. I paused for dramatic effect. The best part is that my lawyer has also been in touch with your employer. The line went completely silent. Turns out, threatening and defrauding elderly clients is exactly the kind of thing that financial services companies take very seriously, especially when those companies are already investigating potential irregularities in their employees' client accounts. How did I find out about the investigation at your work? The same way I found out about your cryptocurrency losses, your fake business loan, and the 3 other fraudulent transactions you've been involved in over the past 5 years. I let that sink in. Here's what's going to happen, Caleb. You're going to sign a quitclaim deed transferring my house back to me. You're going to figure out how to pay back that bank loan without involving my property. And you're going to publicly apologize to Michelle and Tyler for trying to turn them against me. Dad, I can't pay back that loan. I don't have the money. Then you should have thought about that before you stole from your father and gambled it away on internet funny money. If I can't pay back the loan, I'll lose everything. My job, my apartment, my car. I'll go to prison. For just a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy for my son. But then I remembered him saying, You're too old to own property. And the feeling passed. Caleb, I worked double shifts for 30 years to give you and your siblings everything you needed. I sacrificed my health, my free time, and my comfort to make sure you could go to college and build a successful career. And this is how you repay me? Dad, I was trying to help you. No, you were trying to help yourself. You saw dollar signs when you looked at my house and you decided that your old man was too stupid and too old to notice what you were doing. I took a deep breath. But here's the thing, son. I'm giving you one chance to make this right. One chance to act like the man your mother and I raised you to be. What do you want me to do? Meet me at Patricia Hendrix's office tomorrow at 10 a.m. Bring a cashier's check for $5,000 to cover my legal fees. Sign the papers transferring my house back to me. And then we'll figure out together how you're going to clean up the mess you've made without destroying our family. And if I don't, then Patricia will file criminal charges against you for elder abuse, fraud, and theft. Your employer will receive a complete report of your activities, and I'll make sure that Michelle and Tyler know exactly what kind of person their big brother really is. The line was quiet for a long time. Finally, Caleb spoke. I'll be there. The next morning, I arrived at Patricia Hendrix's office 30 minutes early. I wanted to be prepared for whatever Caleb might try to pull. At exactly 10 a.m., Caleb walked in wearing a wrinkled suit and looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled and there were dark circles under his eyes. He handed Patricia a cashier's check for $5,000 without saying a word. Mr. Patterson, Patricia said to Caleb, I have the quitclaim deed prepared. This document will transfer full ownership of the property back to your father. Do you understand what you're signing? Caleb looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger or arrogance or manipulation. Just defeat. I understand, he said quietly. He signed the papers. Patricia notarized the documents and handed me copies. Congratulations, Mr. Patterson, she said to me. You're officially the owner of your house again. But I wasn't finished. Caleb, we need to talk about the bank loan. He looked up at me with hollow eyes. I've been thinking about your situation, I continued, and I have a proposal. Caleb didn't respond, but I could see I had his attention. I'm going to take out a home equity loan against my house, for $200,000. I'll use that money to pay off your fraudulent bank loan, which will stop the criminal investigation and keep you out of prison. Hope flickered in Caleb's eyes. But, I continued, you're going to pay me back every penny, with interest, over the next 10 years. That's $2,000 a month plus interest for the next decade. Dad, I don't know if I can afford. You'll make it work. You'll sell that BMW and buy a used car. You'll move out of that expensive apartment and find something you can actually afford. You'll stop eating at fancy restaurants and wearing $500 suits. You'll live like a normal person instead of the spoiled brat you've become. Caleb's face flushed red, but he didn't argue. And, I said, standing up, you'll come to family dinner every Sunday at my house. Not to visit me, but to do yard work, home maintenance, and whatever other chores I need help with. Consider it part of your debt service. Dad, that's humiliating. Not as humiliating as prison. Patricia was trying very hard not to smile as she watched this exchange. Do we have a deal? I asked. Caleb looked at the floor for a long time. Then he nodded. Good. Patricia will draw up the loan documents. You'll sign them today. That was 6 months ago. True to his word, Caleb has made every payment on time. He sold his BMW and bought a 10-year-old Honda Civic. He moved out of his luxury apartment and into a modest one-bedroom place across town. And every Sunday, he shows up at my house to mow the lawn, clean the gutters, and fix whatever needs fixing. It's the most time we've spent together since he was in high school. The first few Sundays were awkward and tense. Caleb would arrive, do his work in silence, and leave as quickly as possible. But gradually something started to change. Maybe it was the physical labor that reminded him of the values I'd tried to teach him growing up. Maybe it was being back in the house where he'd been raised, surrounded by memories of his mother. Or maybe it was just finally seeing the consequences of his actions up close. Whatever it was, Caleb started talking to me again. Really talking, not just the superficial conversations we'd had for years. 3 months ago, while he was replacing some rotted boards on my back deck, he suddenly stopped working and sat down on the steps. "Dad," he said, "I need to tell you something." I sat down next to him. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. For lying to you, for stealing from you, for trying to kick you out of your own house, for dishonoring Mom's memory, for being the kind of person she would be ashamed of." It was the first time I'd seen him cry since his mother's funeral. "I don't know what happened to me," he continued. "I got so caught up in trying to look successful and important that I forgot who I really was. I forgot what you and Mom taught me about treating people right." "Son," I said, "we all make mistakes. What matters is what we do to make things right." We sat there in silence for a while, both of us thinking about Sarah and how much she would have hated seeing our family torn apart the way it had been. "Dad," Caleb said finally, "I know I don't deserve it, but is there any chance we could start over? Not forget what happened, but maybe find a way to be father and son again?" I looked at my oldest child, the little boy who used to help me fix things around the house, the teenager who'd worked at the grocery store to help pay for his school clothes, the young man who'd graduated from college and made me proud. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost that person. But maybe, just maybe, he was still in there. "We can try," I said. Since then, our relationship has slowly started to heal. It's not the same as it was before. I don't think it ever will be. But it's something real again. Caleb still has 7.5 years of payments left on his debt to me. But more importantly, he's working hard to rebuild the trust he destroyed and to become the kind of man his mother would be proud of. He's been going to therapy to understand why he became so obsessed with money and status that he was willing to hurt his own family. He's been attending a support group for people recovering from gambling addiction, because that's essentially what his cryptocurrency investment was. And he's been slowly rebuilding his relationships with Michelle and Tyler, who were both devastated when they learned the full extent of what he'd done. Michelle told me last month that Caleb had called her to apologize and to ask if there was anything he could do to make up for trying to turn the family against me. "I told him," Michelle said, "that the only thing he could do was be a better man from now on. And so far, it looks like he's trying." Tyler has been slower to forgive, but even he's starting to come around. Last Sunday, he actually stayed after Caleb finished his yard work, and the three of us sat on the back deck drinking beer and talking about the old days. It felt like family again. But I want to be honest with you about something. This story isn't just about a son who tried to steal his father's house. It's about something much bigger than that. It's about how easy it is for families to fall apart when money gets involved. About how success and status can corrupt people and make them forget what's really important. About how age discrimination is real and pervasive, even within our own families. Every day in this country, elderly people are being victimized by their own children and grandchildren who see them as burdens rather than human beings deserving of respect. Adult children forge signatures on documents, empty bank accounts, and manipulate elderly parents into signing away their assets. It happens because we live in a society that devalues older people. We assume that anyone over a certain age is automatically less capable, less intelligent, and less deserving of autonomy. We use phrases like senior moments and getting old as excuses to dismiss elderly people's concerns and opinions. Caleb was able to almost get away with what he did because he knew that people would believe his version of events over mine. A successful young professional versus a retired factory worker, a sharp guy in an expensive suit versus an old man living alone. In most people's minds, there's no contest. But here's the thing. Being old doesn't make you stupid. It doesn't make you less deserving of respect. And it definitely doesn't give your children the right to steal from you. I'm 67 years old, and my mind is as sharp as it ever was. I can balance my checkbook, manage my medications, maintain my property, and make my own decisions about my life. The idea that I should be warehoused in some institutional facility just because I've reached an arbitrary age is insulting and wrong, and I'm not the only one fighting this fight. Since this whole ordeal began, I've connected with other elderly people who've gone through similar experiences. There's Mrs. Henderson down the street, whose daughter convinced her to sign over power of attorney and then sold her house without permission. There's Frank Martinez from my old job, whose son cleaned out his retirement accounts and disappeared. There's an entire network of older adults who've been victimized by their own families, and most of them never fight back because they don't know how or because they're too ashamed to admit what happened. But we need to fight back. We need to stand up for ourselves and for each other. We need to refuse to be dismissed or marginalized just because we've accumulated a few decades of life experience. We need to challenge the assumption that getting older automatically makes us less capable. We need to demand respect from our children and grandchildren, and we need to hold them accountable when they fail to give it to us. And we need to stop being embarrassed about being victims of elder abuse. This isn't our fault. We're not stupid or gullible for trusting our own children. We're human beings who expected to be treated with love and respect by the people we raised and sacrificed for. If you're watching this video and you're a young person, I want you to listen carefully. Your parents and grandparents are not burdens. They are not obstacles to your success. They are not ATM machines that you can withdraw from whenever you need money. They are human beings who have lived full, complex lives. They have hopes and dreams and fears just like you do. They have worked hard, made sacrifices, and earned the right to be treated with dignity and respect. The house they live in isn't your inheritance, it's their home. The money in their bank account isn't your emergency fund, it's their security. The decisions about their lives aren't yours to make, they're theirs to make, as long as they're mentally competent to make them. And before you decide that someone is too old to manage their own affairs, ask yourself this: are they actually incompetent, or are they just older than you? Are they actually making poor decisions, or are they just making decisions you don't agree with? Because there's a big difference between those things, and confusing them can destroy families and hurt people who don't deserve to be hurt. And if you're watching this and you're an older person who's facing pressure from adult children about your living situation, your finances, or your decision-making, I want you to know something. You have rights, you have value, you have worth that goes far beyond whatever assets you've accumulated over your lifetime. Don't let anyone, not even your own children, convince you that you're too old, too confused, or too much trouble to deserve respect and autonomy. If someone is pressuring you to sign documents you don't understand, don't sign them. Ask questions. Demand explanations. Get a second opinion from a lawyer who represents you, not the person asking you to sign. If someone is telling you that you're too old to live in your own home, ask them why. What specifically are they concerned about? What evidence do they have that you can't manage on your own? Are their concerns based on actual problems, or on assumptions about what people your age should and shouldn't be able to do? And if someone is stealing from you or manipulating you, fight back. It's not too late. You're not powerless. There are lawyers who specialize in elder abuse cases. There are advocacy organizations that can help. There are other people who've been through what you're going through, and they can provide support and guidance. Don't suffer in silence. Don't be ashamed. Don't give up. My fight with Caleb is far from over. He still owes me 7.5 years of payments. Our relationship is still fragile and still being rebuilt. There are days when I look at him and still feel angry about everything he put me through. But there are also days when I see glimpses of the son I raised. The one who used to help me fix broken things around the house. The one who worked hard in school and made his mother proud. The one who had good values before he lost his way. I'm not sure our relationship will ever be completely healed. The trust that was broken may never be fully restored. But we're trying, and that's something. More importantly, I'm still living in my house. My name is back on the deed. I'm making my own decisions about my life, my health, and my future. I wake up every morning in the bedroom I shared with Sarah for 20 years. I drink my coffee at the kitchen table where we raised our children. I sit on the back deck where we used to watch Tyler play baseball in the yard. This is my home, and I fought for it, and I won. But there's one more thing I need to tell you. Something I discovered just last month that changed everything I thought I knew about this whole situation. Remember how I mentioned that Caleb had lost the $200,000 loan money on cryptocurrency investments? Well, it turns out that wasn't entirely true. Last month, while Caleb was doing some work in my basement, he accidentally knocked over a box of old financial documents. As we were cleaning up the scattered papers, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Mixed in with my old tax returns and insurance policies was a bank statement that didn't belong to me. It was addressed to Caleb, dated from 3 months ago, right around the time he'd taken out the loan against my house. The statement showed a balance of $180,000 in a savings account I'd never heard of. When I confronted Caleb about it, he broke down completely. The truth was, he hadn't lost the money in cryptocurrency at all. He'd been lying about that to gain my sympathy and make me more likely to help him pay back the loan. The real truth was much worse. Caleb had taken that $200,000 and invested it in a legitimate business opportunity, a franchise restaurant that a friend of his was opening. It was actually a good investment that was already showing returns. But he hadn't told me about it because he wanted to keep all the profits for himself. His plan had been to let me pay off the original bank loan with my home equity loan, continue making payments to me at a low interest rate, while simultaneously collecting much higher returns on his secret restaurant investment. He was essentially using me as a low-interest bank to fund his business venture, while planning to pocket the difference. When I realized what he'd done, I felt that familiar rage building up inside me again. "Caleb," I said, "you've been lying to me for 6 months. Even after everything we've been through, even after you supposedly learned your lesson, you were still trying to steal from me." He couldn't look me in the eye. "Dad, I was going to tell you about the restaurant eventually, and I was going to share the profits with you. I just wanted to make sure it was successful first. That's not your decision to make. That money should have gone to pay back the bank loan, not to fund your secret business." What happened next was the most difficult conversation I've ever had with any of my children. I told Caleb that he had 2 choices. Option 1. He could cash out his restaurant investment immediately, use the money to pay off my home equity loan in full, and we could pretend the last 6 months never happened. Option 2. He could continue with his current payment plan to me, but I would become a 50% partner in his restaurant investment. Any profits from the business would be split between us equally, and I would have full transparency into the financial operations. "But Dad," Caleb protested, "that restaurant was my idea. I found the opportunity, I did the research, I took the risk." "With my money," I interrupted. "Money you stole from me. Money you obtained by defrauding a bank using my house as collateral." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the yard where Sarah used to plant her flower garden. "Caleb, I've given you chance after chance to do the right thing. I saved you from prison. I helped you keep your job. I gave you an opportunity to rebuild our relationship, and you repaid me by lying to my face for 6 months and trying to steal from me again." I turned back to face him. "I'm done being your victim. I'm done being the foolish old man who gets taken advantage of by his smooth-talking son. You want to be in business? Fine. But you're going to be in business with me, as an equal partner, or you're going to be in business by yourself with no money." Caleb was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, "What would partnership look like?" The next week, Patricia Hendricks drew up partnership agreements that made me a 50% owner of Caleb's restaurant investment. The restaurant, it turned out, was actually doing quite well. It was a franchise location of a popular breakfast chain, located in a busy shopping center about an hour north of Columbus. Caleb's friend was managing the day-to-day operations, but as investors, Caleb and I were entitled to monthly financial reports and quarterly profit distributions. Our first profit distribution was $8,000, which we split evenly. I used my $4,000 to take Michelle and Tyler and their families on a weekend vacation to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, something I hadn't been able to afford to do in years. Caleb used his $4,000 to make an extra payment on his debt to me. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt like maybe Caleb was finally starting to understand how partnerships and families are supposed to work. But the real test came 2 months later. In December, Caleb's friend approached us about opening a second restaurant location. It would require an additional investment of $150,000, but the projected returns were even higher than our first location. Caleb came to me excited about the opportunity. "Dad, this could be huge for us. We could double our profits within a year. Where would we get $150,000? I asked. "Well, I've been thinking you still have equity in the house. We could take out another loan." "No." The word came out harder than I'd intended, but I meant it. "Caleb, I am not putting my house at risk again. Not for any reason. Not even for a legitimate business opportunity." "But Dad, this is different. We're partners now. We're in this together. We're partners in the restaurant you bought with money you stole from me. That doesn't mean I'm willing to risk my home for your business ambitions." I could see the disappointment in his face, but I also saw something else. Acceptance, maybe even respect. "You're right," he said finally. "I shouldn't have even suggested it. Your house is off limits, period. So how else could we fund the expansion?" Caleb thought about it for a minute. "Well, I could take out a personal loan based on my income and our existing restaurant profits. It would be higher interest than a home equity loan, but it would be my risk, not yours." "And if the second restaurant fails and you can't make the payments?" "Then I'd lose the second restaurant, but the first one would still be safe, and your house would never be at risk." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and for the first time in years, I was proud of what I saw. "Caleb, that sounds like a reasonable business plan. If you want to take that risk with your own credit and your own assets, I support you." He smiled, but it wasn't the arrogant smile I'd grown to hate. It was the genuine smile of the little boy I used to know. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot to me." Caleb got approved for the personal loan, and we opened the second restaurant in March. It's been even more successful than we projected. Between both restaurants, our monthly profit distributions have grown to about $6,000 each. I'm making more money in retirement than I ever made working at the factory. But more importantly, Caleb and I have developed a real partnership based on mutual respect and trust. He consults me on business decisions not because he has to, but because he values my opinion and experience. Every month we meet to review the financial reports from both restaurants. We discuss expansion opportunities, staffing issues, and market trends. I've learned more about business in the past year than I learned in my entire working career. And Caleb has learned something too. He's learned that his old man isn't just a source of money or a burden to be managed. I'm a human being with knowledge, experience, and insights that can be valuable if he's smart enough to listen. Our Sunday dinners have evolved too. Instead of Caleb just doing yard work and leaving, we now spend the afternoon talking about business, family, and life. Sometimes Michelle and Tyler join us, and it feels like we're a real family again. Last month, Tyler asked if he could invest in our restaurants too. He has some savings from his construction work, and he's been watching how well our partnership has worked out. "I don't know anything about restaurants," Tyler said, "but I know about hard work and treating people right. And I trust you guys to teach me the business side." So now we're a three-way partnership, the Patterson Family Restaurant Group. It has a nice ring to it. 6 months ago, if someone had told me that Caleb and I would be business partners, I would have laughed at them. The idea of trusting my son with anything more valuable than a $20 bill seemed impossible. But sometimes the best relationships are forged in the crucible of conflict and adversity. Caleb had to lose everything: his arrogance, his sense of entitlement, his belief that he could manipulate and control people, before he could find his way back to being the kind of person his mother and I had raised him to be. And I had to learn to fight for myself, to stand up to someone I loved, and to demand the respect I deserved as a human being and as his father. Neither of us is the same person we were 2 years ago. I'm stronger and more confident. Caleb is humbler and more genuine. Our relationship isn't perfect. There are still moments when I remember how he looked at me when he said, "You're too old to own property," and I feel a flash of anger. There are still times when I catch him calculating profit margins in his head, and I wonder if he's planning some new scheme. But mostly, when I look at Caleb now, I see the man Sarah and I always hoped he would become. A man who works hard, treats people fairly, and takes responsibility for his mistakes. A man who calls his father every week just to check in, not because he wants something, but because he cares. A man who shows up when he says he will, and does what he promises to do. A man who's learned that family loyalty isn't something you can deposit in a bank account, but it's more valuable than any amount of money you could ever steal. So what's the lesson in all of this? If you're facing betrayal from someone you trust, don't give up. Fight back. Seek help. Demand justice. You're stronger than you think, and you deserve better than to be victimized by people who should be protecting you. If you've made mistakes that have hurt your family, it's not too late to make things right. But it's going to require more than just words. It's going to require genuine change, consistent effort, and probably some uncomfortable consequences for your actions. And if you're watching this story unfold and thinking about your own relationships with your parents, grandparents, or children, ask yourself this: are you treating the people you love with the respect they deserve? Are you honoring the sacrifices they've made for you? Are you building relationships based on love and mutual respect? Or are you just waiting for them to die so you can inherit their stuff? Because at the end of the day, that's what this story is really about. It's about love and respect and family and the choice we all have to make about what kind of people we want to be. But there's one last thing I need to tell you, because I promised at the beginning that this story was full of twists and surprises. Remember that bank message I sent that started this whole chain of events? The one that exposed Caleb's fraud and nearly sent him to prison? Well, here's something I never told Caleb and something I'm only sharing with you now. I never actually intended for things to go as far as they did. When I walked into that bank and handed Janet Morrison my documentation, I thought I was just going to scare Caleb a little bit, make him sweat, force him to have an honest conversation with me about what he'd done. I never expected the bank to freeze his account and threaten him with criminal charges. I never expected him to panic and threaten to have me declared mentally incompetent. I never expected to have to hire a private investigator and lawyer and turn this into a full-scale war. My original plan was much simpler. I was going to present my evidence to the bank, let them scare him with some official-sounding letters, and then step in as the loving father who would help him clean up his mess if he'd just be honest with me and treat me with respect. But when Caleb responded to the bank's letter by threatening me instead of apologizing to me, when he tried to double down on his lies and manipulation instead of coming clean, when he showed me that he still saw me as a weak old man he could push around, that's when I decided to take the gloves off. The truth is, I gave Caleb multiple opportunities to do the right thing. I gave him chances to apologize, to make amends, to treat me like a human being deserving of respect. He chose to escalate the conflict at every turn. He chose to threaten me instead of apologizing to me. He chose to try to destroy my relationships with Michelle and Tyler instead of taking responsibility for his actions. He chose to see how far he could push me instead of recognizing that he'd already pushed me too far. So yes, I sent the bank a message. But the message wasn't really for the bank. The message was for Caleb. And the message was this: I'm not the helpless old man you think I am. I'm not going to be your victim. I'm not going to let you steal from me, lie to me, and disrespect me without consequences. You want to test me? Let's see how that works out for you. Today I'm still living in my house on Maple Street, the same house where Sarah and I raised our 3 children, the same house I've been paying for since 1988. My name is back on the deed, where it belongs. Caleb still owes me about $140,000 on the loan I gave him to pay back the bank, but at this point, that's just business. Our restaurant partnership has been so successful that he'll probably be able to pay me back early if he wants to. But more importantly, I have my son back. Not the arrogant, manipulative man who tried to steal my house, but the real Caleb. The one who was buried under years of bad choices and misplaced priorities. We have Sunday dinner together every week. We're building a business together. We're planning for the future together. And sometimes when we're sitting on the back deck talking about the restaurants or the family or life in general, I catch glimpses of Sarah in his face. I see the values she instilled in him, the love she gave him, the hope she had for the man he would become. It took a long time and it took a fight, but he got there. We both did. So that's my story. That's how a 67-year-old old man fought back against his own son and won. But the real victory wasn't getting my house back. It wasn't even getting my money back, or watching Caleb face the consequences of his actions. The real victory was getting my family back. 3 weeks ago, we had a family barbecue in my backyard to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of our restaurant partnership. Michelle brought her famous potato salad, Tyler grilled burgers on the same grill I've had for 15 years, and Caleb brought flowers. Not expensive flowers from some fancy florist, but simple daisies from the grocery store, Sarah's favorite flowers. He walked over to the corner of the yard where I'd planted a small memorial garden for his mother and placed the flowers next to her headstone. "Hey, Mom," I heard him whisper. "I'm sorry it took me so long to remember who you raised me to be." Then he came back to the deck where the rest of us were sitting, and for the first time in 27 years he told us stories about his mother. Real stories, not just the sanitized memories we usually shared, but honest, complicated, beautiful stories about the woman who had shaped all of our lives. He talked about how she used to make him practice his multiplication tables while she folded laundry, and how she never let him give up on something just because it was hard. He talked about the time she caught him lying about breaking Mrs. Henderson's window with a baseball, and how she marched him over there to confess and work off the cost of repairs. He talked about the conversations they used to have about what it meant to be a good man, a good husband, and a good father someday. "She always said that how you treat people when you have power over them shows who you really are," Caleb said, looking directly at me. I forgot that for a while, but I remember now. As I listened to him talk about Sarah, I realized that the woman I'd loved and lost was still here with us. She was in the values we'd taught our children, in the memories we shared, and in the second chances we gave each other. She was in Michelle's compassion, and Tyler's loyalty, and Caleb's hard-won wisdom. She was in the family dinners we shared, and the business we'd built together, and the forgiveness we'd learned to give each other. She was in the house where we'd raised our children, and the yard where they'd played, and the kitchen table where we'd solved 1,000 problems together. Most of all, she was in the love that had brought us back together after nearly losing each other forever. If you've made it this far in my story, I want to thank you for listening. I know it's been long, and I know some parts have been hard to hear, but I told you this story for a reason. Every day, families are being torn apart by greed, manipulation, and the mistaken belief that money is more important than love. Every day, elderly people are being victimized by their own children who see them as burdens rather than blessings. Every day, young people are making choices that they think will bring them success and happiness, but that actually destroy the relationships that matter most. This doesn't have to be your story. If you're a young person watching this, remember that your parents and grandparents won't be here forever. Don't waste the time you have with them trying to figure out what you can get from them. Focus instead on what you can give to them, what you can learn from them, and how you can honor the sacrifices they've made for you. If you're an older person watching this, remember that you have value beyond your bank account and your property. You have wisdom, experience, and love to offer. Don't let anyone convince you that your age makes you less worthy of respect and autonomy. And if you're someone who's made mistakes that have hurt your family, remember that redemption is possible. It's not easy, and it's not quick, but it's possible if you're willing to do the hard work of change. Caleb and I almost lost each other forever. We came within a hair's breadth of destroying our relationship completely over money and pride, and the foolish belief that we could control each other. But we found our way back to each other because we remembered something more important than our anger and our hurt and our mistakes. We remembered that we're family. And family, at its best, is about love and forgiveness and second chances and the willingness to fight for each other instead of against each other. That's what Sarah taught us. That's what she would have wanted for us. And that's what we finally learned to give each other. If this story has touched you, if it's made you think about your own family relationships, if it's inspired you to fight back against injustice or to seek forgiveness for mistakes you've made, then I want you to do something for me. I want you to call someone you love. Right now, today. Call your mom or your dad or your grandparents or your children or your siblings. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you've figured out exactly what to say. Don't wait until it's convenient or comfortable. Just call them. Tell them you love them. Tell them you're grateful for them. Tell them you're sorry if you've hurt them. Tell them you want to do better. Life is short and families are precious and time is the most valuable thing any of us have. Don't waste it. Don't let pride or stubbornness or past hurts keep you from the people who matter most. Don't let money or property or inheritance tear apart relationships that took decades to build. Don't wait until it's too late to say the things that need to be said and do the things that need to be done. Because at the end of the day, when everything else is stripped away, all we really have is each other, and that's worth fighting for. My name is Eugene Patterson. I'm 67 years old, and I live in a 3-bedroom ranch house on Maple Street that I've been paying for since 1988. I'm a widower, a father, a grandfather, and a business partner. I'm a survivor of fraud and elder abuse and family betrayal. I'm a fighter who refused to be victimized and a father who never gave up on his son. I'm living proof that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to demand the respect you deserve, and to fight for the relationships that matter most. And I'm here to tell you that no matter how old you are, no matter how powerless you feel, no matter how hopeless your situation seems, you are stronger than you think. You are more valuable than your age or your assets or your perceived limitations. You are worth fighting for. And if you're willing to fight for yourself, you might just discover that the people you love are worth fighting for too. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for caring about an old man's struggle for justice and redemption. And thank you for being the kind of people who believe that families can heal and that love can triumph over greed and that it's never too late for second chances. Now go call someone you love. And remember, you're never too old to own property, to make your own decisions, or to demand the respect you deserve. Never let anyone tell you otherwise.